I'm Jaime Levine with Elder Law and Advocacy. Today we have the pleasure of having an ombudsman in the office. Kristin Rigsbee has joined us. We also have attorney Andrew Thompson in the office, so the three of us are going to have a chat about nursing homes and residential care for the elderly and what it's like in California. But I first would like to introduce Kristin. So Kristin is the Training and Outreach Specialist for the Long-Term Care Ombudsman in San Diego. I don't really know your jurisdiction.
San Diego.
San Diego, great. So Kristin, can you just give us a little bit of information about your background and what the Ombudsman is and does?
Sure, I would love to. Well, I have quite a few years of experience working in long-term care facilities. I was a case manager in skilled nursing facilities in multiple different facilities, probably a cumulative time of probably about almost 20 years. I also managed memory care units in assisted living and had my administrator's license for assisted living. And then also worked for an elder law attorney that did more estate planning and those kind of issues. So I learned quite a lot there about things that I didn't know about Medi-Cal and coverage. And then I actually got an opportunity to apply for a job with the county through the Ombudsman's office. And I have since been with the Ombudsman for going on almost 12 years now.
Nice.
And it's the best job I've had yet.
Wonderful. And what is an ombudsman?
So an ombudsman, it's actually a Swedish word that means advocate. It's a kind of hard word to say, and most people have difficulty saying it. But it basically means advocate. There are ombudsmen for all sorts of different agencies. Even the DMV has an ombudsman. So basically it is someone there whose sole role is to advocate for you and to assist you with whatever concern you might have in navigating the system that ombudsman is assigned with. Military has an ombudsman because there's lots of different things going on there. So that's what our role is in long-term care, is for our sole purpose is focused solely on the resident, what they want, what care needs they have. Do they have unmet needs? Do they have questions? Is there something we can help them with? So that's where our focus is solely on the resident and what care needs they need.
Okay, I got it. So ombudsman is really an advocate for the consumer in a way.
Yes.
And just to use an analogy that everybody understands, the IRS has a taxpayer advocate. So when you're going up against the IRS for anything, if you have a disagreement about your tax return or something like that, there is an office you can call. And this is analogous to that. So residents who are not happy with the care they're receiving or some aspect of what's going on in their life can call the Ombudsman's office?
Yes. So our program actually was a pilot program in the early 1970s because at that time there were nursing homes, there were issues in these homes. And our program was, it was thought to see whether a volunteer going into a nursing home, talking with the residents, and seeing if they could help with any of the issues that the residents were experiencing would be beneficial. And the results of that were very, very positive. The residents felt heard. They were able to resolve many of the quality of life issues and care issues that were happening at the time. And so it actually became a federal mandate. So no matter where, in a sense, you go in the United States, there is an ombudsman for every single long-term care facility. So we are a state program, even though here in San Diego we're housed in the county, we are a state program. So we have 35 programs within the state of California that report to a governor-appointed state ombudsman. The other thing that's very unique about our program is we're also federally mandated to be volunteer. So when an ombudsman goes out, it may be, we have very limited staff. We have 12 staff to manage the county. So it may be a volunteer coming in to assist the resident, which is which is a really neat thing.
Okay, so you have 12 staff, and then you have a number of volunteers, and
Yes.
they cover how many facilities approximately?
We cover, I think the number is about 84
Wow.
skilled nursing facilities, and probably close to 580 assisted livings and board and cares.
580.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we make our mandate is to visit these facilities at a minimum of a quarterly basis. We try very hard to visit assisted livings and board and cares once a month. And skilled nursing, if we had enough volunteers, would be at least once a week.
Wow.
The issues demand quite a bit more time in a skilled nursing facility than they do in an assisted living or board and care.
Okay. And just to address the protocol, do you call the facility when you're going there, or is it just an unannounced visit?
We go unannounced. In a sense, we can walk in 24/7 if we feel that we need to. We need to have a good reason, because usually we're not going to walk in at 2 a.m. That would be
Right.
a little disruptive. All of our visits are unannounced. When we go into a facility, we do announce ourselves that we're there, but we're not going to disclose to the facility who we're there to see or why we're there. They're not entitled to that information. We will usually get a resident census or a roster to help us find the residents that we may be needing to see if, like, we have a complaint that we need to see a specific resident. Our goal is to maintain confidentiality as much as possible. So we're generally not going to ask the facility, where is John Doe? We're going to find John Doe ourselves through the census. If we have a complaint, we're also not going to go in and go directly to that person. We're going to go and do a walkthrough for the facility, stop in and chat with people, and then go see John Doe, and then come out and go chat with some other people or go do something else, because we want to try as much as possible to keep the confidentiality of any resident who has a concern about the facility.
And it's not only concerns. I mean, you guys are in there all the time anyway.
Yes.
Which also kind of takes away from, isolating that one person for one complaint that happens to be there, because you guys are in the facilities constantly.
Yes. Our goal is to visit facilities as much as we can, because we've seen that when we visit facilities frequently, they generally tend to run better. The residents begin to really know who we are. If you saw somebody just once a quarter, you might not remember them the next time. So the more frequently an ombudsman is in the building, the better rapport they can establish with the residents. And that rapport is huge, because only when you have a good rapport with that resident are they going to perhaps be willing to tell you what concerns they may have.
So you actually establish relationships with
Yes.
with the residents. It's not just you coming in and checking on them. You actually have a conversation. What is that
yes.
like?
Well, we always come in and we talk with everyone. We talk with residents. We talk with family members. We want to make sure that they know who we are, because most people don't.
Right.
Facilities generally don't promote our program. Our posters are there, but they're not necessarily telling a resident, oh, if you have a concern, talk with the ombudsman. So we want to make sure that the residents understand who we are. They see who we are, because they're going to see us in the building. They may not remember our name, but they know that we're somebody there to help them. We also like to let family members know this is what we do, and they're very appreciative of the additional oversight and someone really coming in and checking on their loved one. We tend to focus a lot on residents with dementia. They're oftentimes people who don't have family members that visit. That's a very common problem, and we try to be checking on residents that don't have anyone who are actively visiting or don't visit frequently. We attend resident council meetings if we are invited by the residents. So then we're not there to, in a sense, take over the meeting or discuss, but we're there to help the residents understand what their rights are and how that applies within the system.
Can you say something more about those meetings? What are those meetings?
So these are required meetings that within a skilled nursing facility, they are required to have a resident council meeting. In large assisted livings, as long as there's 2 residents that would like to have a resident meeting, then they can have one. Now, what these meetings are designed to be is solely a resident-only meeting. So residents can get together.
Kristin, just really quickly, by residents, you also mean their families as well, right?
Well, no, not at a resident council, unless they are actually invited by the residents there. Family can actually have their own separate family council, which they can put together as well, which we highly encourage. But for the residents, it is designed to be their meeting. There is no staff there unless the residents actually want the staff person there, or any outside people, ombudsman included. Anyone coming into the meeting needs to be invited by the residents. And the goal is to have a safe space to be able to communicate any issues, things that they would like, as well as when you look at the overall life experience, given that for most residents who attend a resident council meeting live in the facility as long-term, you're looking at this as their home. And what would you like to see in your home? How would you like your home changed? Are there things that you would like to make the quality of your life in this home better? And so those are what it's designed to be. What we find, though, is many times residents choose not to or are not capable of really fulfilling the actual role of, say, a resident council president, someone acting as a secretary to take minutes. So under the regulations, the facility is required to have a person that is authorized by the resident council to come in and assist them if they would like. So that person is then oftentimes taking the notes. Usually it's an activity director.
I see.
Does that have a chilling effect on the meetings?
Well, it can, yes. If a resident particularly has a sensitive issue that would maybe be something that they wouldn't want staff to know, this becomes automatically alerted by the staff. When residents have concerns, the secretary will take down those concerns. They then get directed to the departments in which those concerns can be addressed. When that department addresses those concerns, it comes back to the next meeting as old business and their response to those. So generally, you're going to find that issues brought up in a resident council are much more general, like I don't like the food, or why can't we each have our own computer, or different things like that. If it is something very, very personal to the resident individually, that is often not the forum to bring those up. Just because, one, it really is not going to be private. You're going to be saying it to however many residents are at this meeting. It is also then alerted to the staff as an issue. So there's an appropriate place to bring up certain issues. So these are more your community issues, things that may affect other residents.
Okay. Are we talking about nursing homes and RCFEs or just?
That's both.
Both.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And you're sometimes invited to those meetings, or the ombudsman are sometimes invited to those
Usually we're always invited to the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to, since I brought up nursing homes and RCFEs, I just want to read the definition so that we have it out there and everyone knows what we're talking about, since, most people watching this probably don't know the definition of these things. So a nursing home is a residential facility providing 24-hour medical, personal, and custodial care for individuals who cannot live independently They bridge the gap between hospital and home care, offering round-the-clock supervision, medication management, and daily living assistance.
That sound accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And an RCFE, or Residential Care Facility for the Elderly, is an official state licensing category, particularly in California, for non-medical senior care homes. Commonly known as assisted living or board and care, these facilities provide 24-hour supervision, housing, meals, and help with daily activities for adults 60 and older. RCFEs are designed for individuals who cannot live independently but do not require 24/7 skilled nursing care.
Yes.
Okay. And you, as you said, you visit both. You go to nursing homes and you go to RCFEs.
Yes.
And your protocol is similar, except you try to get to nursing homes more often, and there are many fewer nursing homes than there are RCFEs.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when you just happen upon an issue that you find concerning, or if there's a report and you are following up on something. Yes.
Or we can take it maybe a step back, how you actually get...
Great point. Yes. Let's do that.
Yeah.
people
How
reach
does
out to you
information get
rather
to
than
us?
just going into the facility? How else do people reach you?
So when we go and we visit a facility, we're talking with residents. So residents may bring up issues, and that's one way that we would receive them. We get calls into our office from family members, residents, community members sometimes that will bring up issues. We also get the State of California Form 341, which is the Adult Independent Abuse Reporting Form. And so we get reports about varying different issues through that form.
Who issues those?
So these, we will receive these from any mandated reporter. So they may come from a facility staff person, they may come from a hospital, a doctor's office, different things like that. Family, friends, clergy, we've had complaints come in where family members have called the governor and said, hey, this is what's going on, and things filter down. The Board of Supervisors, any of our representatives have received complaints, and they get filtered down. So they can come from just literally anywhere. What we're concerned about is not, in a sense, where the complaint is coming from, but what the complaint actually is. Because our goal then is to go to the resident and talk with them to see whether whatever issue was brought up is actually a problem for them. We're not going to disclose anything that we have received from someone else on an SOC 341 or a family member calling or wherever that information came from. But we're going to go talk with the resident, in a sense, very casually, and just say, how are things? And knowing that information about what a concern is, we're going to try to direct the conversation to address the area of concern and see, does the resident have any concerns with that particular area? Because we don't want to feed that information to the resident and think, oh, I have a problem. Like, we're not going to go, well, we got a complaint about you regarding this. They're not going to know any of that because that would be very disruptive to the resident to say anything like that. And so we're going to just have a conversation and see, are you having any issues? So if it's like a food issue, we're going to start talking about food. How's your food here? Is it good? Is your hot food hot? Is your cold food cold? We'll start going through all the steps and try to cover every avenue to see what the resident actually says. And based on what the resident then responds, they may actually have a concern about something, but we're also going to then ask them, is this something that you would like assistance with? Because many times residents will have concerns about varying different things of their daily life and discuss it with family. And family thinks it's an issue that the resident really needs assistance with. But they're just going, this is what my daily life is. Yeah, today the meal was terrible. Yesterday the meal was great. This activity was good. but it doesn't necessarily mean it's something that the resident themselves actually wants changed. And so that's why our whole focus is on the resident. Is this something that's a problem for you? If it is, then we will ask them for consent to discuss it outside of the confines of their room, to talk with staff. And we will develop a plan with the resident. What is your outcome? What do you want to change? What would you like to see as the change? Is it something realistic that we can maybe achieve in this venue? And what parties need to be involved in that change? So it is solely resident driven with the knowledge of the ombudsman to navigate the system. So the resident has to be in full agreement with whatever the plan is. They're in the driver's seat.
Now, I've got a question with that because it's a problem that I face all the time too, and I know you do because we've known each other for years. It's the capacity issue.
Yes.
So when we're talking about somebody who lacks capacity, how do you navigate that with regard to addressing their concerns and validating whether those concerns are real or not?
So that's an excellent question, because we do battle that, because dementia is one of the big problems that many of our seniors experience, especially when you're in a facility. But even someone with dementia can express that something they don't like. They have concerns about it. And so we look at the issue of consent as very individual to the person. I don't look to see, do they have a diagnosis of dementia? It doesn't matter to me, because I'm going to talk with that person. And can they express to me clearly that they have an issue and that they would like our assistance with it? If they can do that and they can discuss, well, I would like this as an outcome and this is okay with me, then even if they have a diagnosis of dementia, I will get consent from that resident to assist them. If the resident may still have an issue, but there seems to be a really significant question about whether they're really understanding, then I will go to whoever their responsible agent is. So if they have a power of attorney or a designated family member as responsible for them, then I will go to them and discuss the situation and see whether this is something that they would like our assistance with. We don't just go to a family member or whoever brought up the complaint or an issue. So we often have one family member bring up an issue, but they're not responsible in a sense for the resident. And we need to speak with someone else, whoever their power of attorney is. So we're only going to go directly to whoever the power of attorney is.
Which is the wonderful thing about the Ombudsman program, because most of the time when somebody has dementia, the general population thinks that they lose all rights altogether. And even the family members with power of attorney, they think that they can just step in and address all the questions. So I love the fact that you don't look at the dementia diagnosis whatsoever when you're talking to somebody with regard to what problems they may have. They don't lose all rights just because they have a diagnosis or because they're in a facility.
Well, and someone with dementia dementia it isn't just you either have capacity or you don't. Mm-hmm. It is such a wide band, and we're looking at how can this person express to me what concerns they have, and do they seem to understand what they want and what the situation is. And that's really what we're looking at, is what does this person really want? Because anyone, no matter what their disability or anything, whether it be dementia, it be a speech impairment, different disabilities like that can make it more challenging to assess someone's cognitive status to give consent. But can we get the basic understanding from them that this is a problem and that they want our assistance? And that's really what we're looking for.
That's it's very different than how we generally work with capacity and consent as attorneys. But it's definitely something that makes a lot of sense in that context. So it's wonderful. So it sounds like when you do get information from a resident about an issue that's come up for one of them, the first, if they give you consent, then you go to the facility and try to work out something with the facility. When does it end up being something beyond that where you have to reach out to another agency or something like that?
Well, generally, what we tend to like to do, it sort of depends on what the complaint or the concern of the resident is. So if they have just one complaint, and it's sort of localized in one department, then we may actually just go to that particular department head, discuss the issue with what the resident wants, or have them come to the room and discuss it with the resident if the resident is okay with that, and try to work something out that way. Most of the time, though, we're not dealing with just one complaint. There are usually a multitude of different complaints in different processes and departments in the facility. So you might have a care issue, you might have a dietary issue, you might have a therapy issue. And so it would not be the most efficient way to go talk with each individual staff person responsible for those departments. So what we do in cases like that is have what's called a care conference. So the chart is there. So we're not necessarily needing to go look in someone's medical record. But all the department heads are there. The resident is hopefully there, as well as their family, if the resident would like their family there. And so we get everybody together, and then we have a conversation. And our role in that meeting is not to necessarily speak up for the resident, but try to get the resident to speak up for themselves. We want to help the resident to be their own best self-advocate, not to come in and do everything for them, but teach them how to advocate for themselves. If they need assistance and we need to do that, we're all there. But our goal is, because we're not there 24/7 whenever an issue comes up, we want the resident to feel comfortable speaking up and knowing who to talk to, so that they can bring up an issue themselves and get it addressed far quicker than if they had to wait and call our office and come out and do all of that. So we want the resident to be the focus and sort of direct the meeting. And we want to ensure that all the residents' concerns are addressed at the meeting, at least the major ones, because we want to ensure that the resident is part of that process. The great thing about that is because when everyone is together, the issue is discussed from both perspectives, the facility and the resident and potentially the family, because not everything is just one-sided. And so it's a really excellent way to hear all sides and all issues and come to a conclusion that best meets the resident's needs, that can be done within the confines and the constraints of the facility, and the resident is agreeing to. It also has accountability as far as who's going to do what and when they're going to do it. So for us, we're then going to follow up and make sure that it gets done. Because many times if there isn't that accountability and follow through after, things just don't get done necessarily, and don't stick as a resolution. Mm-hmm. So even after it is put into place, whatever the changes are, we're going to be checking back with the resident, saying, is this working? Did this fix it? Are there new problems that were not anticipated because of this new change? If it's not working, then we go back and we go, okay, how can we make this work? And we try as many ways as we can to try to make things work. Many issues that residents experience aren't particularly regulatory in nature. They're more quality of life, things that they individually want that are important to them as a person, mm-hmm. and they would like to have that. So when we tend to refer something to, say, licensing, it would be when it's more of a regulatory issue. things that were violations perhaps, or we've tried to resolve this. It is a requirement of the facility. Things are not changing, and we often will encourage the resident to file a complaint. Sometimes it's both. It is something that we can work on part of it, and licensing may need to work on another part of the issue. But generally, we can resolve many of the issues at a much lower level without getting licensing involved and things like that, which actually during resident council meetings, when licensing meets with residents, they always ask, are you bringing it to your resident council? Are you talking with the ombudsman? Because when they're not regulatory issues, they're not, in a sense, that's more our jurisdiction than licensing to fix every little issue that a facility may have, the resident may have in the facility.
Right. So the volunteers, how many volunteers do you have generally?
Well,
Fluctuate.
Fluctuates a lot.
it does fluctuate. Pre-COVID, I had our volunteer base almost up to 100.
Wow.
Since COVID, we're now about 35. And we've been sort of staying about that. So we're in need of a lot more volunteers.
Well, hopefully this will
let's
help you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. How do people volunteer? What kind of training do you do with the volunteers? And
So what we do is our volunteers are required to take a 40-hour state certification training. I provide that training as a virtual training. You do 10 hours minimum of mentoring out in the field. And usually we leave that up to the volunteer to kind of let us know, like, yeah, I feel comfortable now, like I can go into the facility on my own representing the Ombudsman program. And so you get a lot there. We have 18 hours of continuing education that is required every year to maintain your state certification.
wow.
And that's very strict because you can be decertified if you don't maintain your education.
And you offer that as well.
Yes.
That,
Yeah,
I'm assuming that's free for the volunteers, the
Yes.
training? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Everything is free. Sort of on the business end of side, we require a fingerprint clearance, both DOJ and FBI clearance from the state. Because we're housed in the county has also requirement of a physical and to be fit tested for an N95 mask. All of that portion has to be completed before you can go into a facility. So you have to get through the fit testing process to go into a facility. So onboarding can be a more lengthy process. It isn't filling out an application and start volunteering. But it's very worth the wait.
And rightly so. I mean, obviously
Yes.
you're around people who are very vulnerable, so
Yes.
Yeah.
it's necessary to screen people like that.
Yes.
How do the volunteers come to you? How do they find you?
Well, we have, I do outreach events all throughout the county. I do educational trainings. I was just at an event yesterday down in San Isidro, and I will recruit volunteers that way. I have listings out on like Volunteer Match and Ideal List and different things like that. The county puts out their county newsletter, and often we'll have a note in there about volunteering, different things. So it's all over. We're actually looking at some other options. We're looking at a magnetic sticker on our doors that we can say Ombudsman and volunteering and different things. So it's challenging, though. People are not volunteering quite in the same way. And we're more limited in that we can't accept many people because we have a 1-year minimum commitment. And so our program is not really designed for somebody looking for, a few months of
Right.
volunteering.
If you're going to do 40 hours of training, then they have to stick around for a little while.
Yeah, and our program, in a sense, has a larger learning curve of getting used to what you're doing.
Right.
But it is so rewarding. We start everyone out in small 6-bed board and cares, getting to, sort of learn the ropes in a smaller setting. And I love going to our small 6-bed board and cares because you really get to talk with the residents. There's some really fantastic people out there in the facilities, and it's a joy. And I think what warms my heart the most is when I was told I was scolded by a resident because I hadn't been visiting as frequently as I was required to by her, because they miss you. The lack of contact and socialization for many people is very challenging. If you don't have family, who do you rely on? Who do you talk to? And the ombudsman is a person that can come out and help fill that gap.
Right. Or if you have family that doesn't visit.
Or family that doesn't visit. Or unfortunately, there's some adversarial families and just not good dynamics there. So the ombudsman is then the person that can come out and just talk with you and see how you're doing, and just knowing that somebody's actually coming out and cares is huge. And I wish everyone could get a visit all the time because it's desperately needed.
Absolutely.
That loneliness is significant. And even though you're, in a sense, in a home with staff, these are staff. They're paid to be there. Right. There's a different interaction than someone coming to actually see you because they want to. And that's felt by the residents in the facility.
Well, hopefully we can get the volunteer numbers back up to where they were pre-COVID. That COVID was such a disaster for the volunteers.
Yeah.
And the volunteers that you have right now are amazing because a lot of them have been here longer than you and I have been working.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have volunteers that are close to 20 years.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the actual curriculum in terms of the training? I'm sure you go through protocols, and but also do you go through resident rights? Like, I just printed out resident rights, federal and state, and it's a lengthy list. So how much training do you have to do on that?
So our training consists of covering a multitude of topics. So obviously we're going to talk about consent and all those kind of things. But a lot of what we talk about initially in class is, what does it feel like to be a resident? What is the impact? What things have you lost? Many times residents are put in these homes either, through going to a hospital and you're now in a skilled nursing facility, or you've been at home and you maybe don't have the support at home you're no longer independent, and you're put in these places and you're told, oh, everything's great. This is going to be great. Well, when you think about it from the perspective of the resident, and everything I teach in class is from the perspective of the resident, because if you don't think of things from that perspective, you miss so many things, and why something that may sound like a very small, petty, little insignificant kind of concern would be concerning. And so, I'll mention things like, do you drink coffee? Okay, do you gentlemen drink coffee in the morning?
No.
No.
I have enough vices.
But if you think about it, most people you think drink coffee. I don't drink coffee either, so. But that sounds like a small thing. But what if now you could never have another cup of coffee? Would that change how you feel in the morning? Would that change your whole day? How would that impact everything that you do? And you don't think about, well, if I didn't have my cup of coffee, it's no big deal. But for all of the things that we do as a general routine, things that you have in your life that you want to keep that are important, if you had to give up everything in your life but 3 things, what would you keep? It's those kind of questions that you have to stop and you have to really think about, because that's what these people are experiencing. And on top of that, you have all the physical issues, the financial issues, the cognitive issues, every spiritual issues that are all going on at one time. And so for many times a resident, something that will make their day can be something extremely small. But if you're not in tune with where a resident might be, then it's often ignored. It's not thought of as being that important. But if you could get your coffee in the morning when you wanted it, how much of a difference would that make for you?
Right.
And it sounds like a small thing, like it's no big deal. It's not a major care issue. It's not regulatory. But for you, it's individually important because it affects everything about you and how you identify in your day.
Right.
And we really talk about that. What does your day look like? And we have go over quotes from residents about this is a really good day. Oh, I get up and I have my coffee and I go downstairs and I sit in the dining room, and then I go up and I watch TV, and then maybe I'll come down for lunch and I sit there, and then I go back up to my room and watch some more TV, and then it's dinner time. Does that sound like a good day to you? So how can we as an ombudsman help a resident to better the situation that they're in and understand, in a sense, what their rights are in this situation, that they can speak up and say, you know what, I really would like my cup of coffee. How can we make this happen? And not say things because they think somebody will be upset, or they just don't provide it, or nobody cares, or whatever their thinking is. How can we make that an important issue? Because every issue, no matter how small it might seem, can be extremely important for the mental health and well-being of an individual, given that you've lost so much. So a lot of our initial training is really trying to understand where residents are, why they get there, how do they get there, what do they want to do while they're there? How do you adjust to being there when you've been independent at home? Then we really get into, well, what are the problems that residents experience? What are the typical things that most residents are going through? And how do you interact with this person? You may be a person who's blind or deaf, or have a speech impairment. How do you interact with this person? We deal a lot with residents who have some mental health components also. How do you deal with someone who may be bipolar or have significant depression? How are you going to respond, and how do you notice where that person is? And it's really sort of showing people how to be empathetic and being consciously aware of how they're interacting with someone. And so noticing those things that we often just don't notice in our conversation with someone. So we kind of go through that process, and then we get into the nitty-gritty. How can we help someone? What is the process? What are the systems that are in place that we can utilize to assist the resident through that process? Understanding how a skilled nursing facility is set up, how an assisted living functions, what those regulations are, and how a resident's choice and their rights fit into that. Then we get into what all the rights are and what a resident actually has a right to do, and how that integrates into the system. I often use an example of, well, I have a right to eat what I want, and I want lobster. Okay, it's kind of ridiculous. But I want lobster, so I have an expectation of lobster. Mm-hmm. Well, if I'm at home, then in a sense, I'm responsible myself for whatever. But now I'm in a facility. Is the facility responsible for giving me lobster because I want it? I have a right to it, but no, they're not. So I may have a right to something, but I have to understand how that right is going to be outpictured in the environment I am in and what my responsibility in it is, as well as the facility that I'm in. So the facility does not have to provide me lobster no matter how much I want it, but they actually are required to assist me in meeting my needs. Kind of a general requirement, but it could be that I can't think of a way to get lobster. So if they offer an activity of going to a restaurant, then maybe they would go to one where I could get lobster. Or they could call my family and say, Kristin would like some lobster. Could you bring her some? Or could you take her out somewhere? Or maybe I don't have any family. And they might say, well, we could order it from Uber Eats and we can have it delivered here. But that's where, just because I have a right to something doesn't mean that all the responsibility for fulfilling that right falls on the facility. It is a joint thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we come in. So someone needs to understand what their rights are and that they have very specific rights added that they normally have before they ever got into a facility, that nothing has changed. You still have all the same rights. But people often sort of get paralyzed when they're in a facility. It's like, now I have to do whatever the facility wants, and that I can't speak up, and I just have to follow. And it was like, no, you don't. You have a right to all these different things. How can you, as a responsible adult, because you are, stand up and take ownership of the rights that you have?
And certainly not something the facility is telling them.
No, generally not. Facilities will often post resident rights. Every once in a while, during a resident council meeting, they might discuss a resident right. But generally, resident rights isn't something that is overly discussed.
But I mean, technically, they have to disclose them, right? When you are
Well, and they do in the admission contract
Right.
that the resident and/or family gets, and generally
The
nobody
3-inch stack
nobody
of
looks at.
papers.
yeah.
They're also informing them about the Ombudsman program as well in that, but most don't see it. But we do have a brand new poster that's going up as we speak in different facilities. So
And that's mandated too.
yes, the poster is mandated. So in skilled nursing, there should be 4 posters. In assisted livings and board and cares, there should be 1. But if like a large assisted living has more than 60 beds, then they're required to have a poster per 60 beds. So they should have more than 1. So that's there and available for them. But it's often not talked about
Right.
frequently.
I love your example about coffee because it's such a small thing, but it's such a big thing for a lot of people. And a lot of people, when they think about residents of nursing homes, for some reason, it's just a snapshot. They think, oh, okay, that's a group of people who live, elderly people who live in a nursing home. But they don't think about the history. Like this person had a full life, a career, a family, social interactions, problems, and then they started aging and they started to lose. Maybe they lost people in their family they just passed away and they started to lose the ability to work, or maybe they were forced to retire. And then slowly, nobody was ever aiming to end up in a nursing home. So they've come to this point in their life where either because of physical or mental issues or both, they have to have round-the-clock care. Nobody was ever planning on that. And now they're in a situation where those little things are the last kind of remaining vestiges of what they had in their lives. And for the institutions not to take that into account or to try to minimize those needs is really kind of tragic. And so having the Ombudsman there to pick that up is really important.
Well, and you brought up age. And one of the things that we discuss in our certification class is actually age, because most people think of a person in a nursing home as somebody in their 70s, 80s, 90s. California actually has one of the higher populations of people. We actually, in our statistics nationally, have a separate category for people 30 and under
Wow.
in nursing homes. So we're actually seeing, we have a significant number of people who are under the age of 60 living in nursing homes. And so when you think of the nursing home resident, they're not necessarily everybody significantly older who may have dementia. We're looking at people who are younger. Oftentimes, we also address the issue of mental health issues. The needs of somebody who is in their 40s living in a nursing home are going to be different than the needs and concerns of somebody in their 70s or 80s. So if you were in a massive car accident and you're not able to work and now you live in a nursing home, what are your needs going to be versus somebody who's already as they, you might think, lived your life and you're in your retirement? Is a nursing home going to be able to meet your needs? And that's what is often more challenging, is that when you do have a younger population living in a nursing home versus what the typical thing is, everything's going to change, because just activities. Is someone in their 40s going to want to reminisce or do things like that, or just do basic little exercises? Is that going to be fulfilling? And we all want to have a purpose, no matter how old we are, no matter whether we have dementia or not. We all need to feel that we can give back, that we are able to contribute. And oftentimes that's a missing piece in a nursing home, is activities can be designed to just occupy your time. Oh, here's this entertainment. Here, play bingo. Here, do a craft. But what is a purposeful reason that you're there? I've been working in long-term care since 1990, and I remember in many facilities that I worked in, there were many people that would say, "What am I doing here? I'm just waiting for God to take me. I'm waiting to die. I have no purpose. I'm a burden." So when you think of that, and now you're somebody who's in their 40s who is unable to have a job and live their life, what is their experience? It's going to be very, very different than someone who's older. And how do we meet that person's needs? Are they even, can they be met in this facility as it is? And, what services are even available to help someone in their 40s when everybody's thinking everybody in this facility is 70, 80, 90? It's a big challenge.
I had a client who was 25 years old, and she was in a skilled nursing facility because she was a quadriplegic from a domestic violence act. And she had an 8-year-old son. And so when you're talking about somebody who is different than, there is no general population, like you're saying, but that really struck me. I mean, here she is at 25 years old, condemned, so to speak, for the rest of her life to live in a skilled nursing facility, and how the nursing staff and the activities director, how they, everything was a broad brushstroke rather than trying to make individual, which is difficult to do, obviously, especially in these huge facilities. But that one really struck me. And her 8-year-old son coming in to see her. So again, something completely different, a different dynamic than what people often expect when they hear about nursing homes or skilled nursing facilities.
Yeah, and no matter how old you are, that feeling of purpose and being able to contribute is there. I think it's almost innately in us. And how is that going to express? So if you can't express that in a functional way, it may get expressed in a dysfunctional way.
Right.
It's and then you wind up with behavioral issues because the base need is not being met. Like for our program, we will have residents who might call our office frequently. They have constant issues about different things. But when you talk with the resident, they're just upset with everything. Every issue you try to address, nothing's good enough, nothing's going to work, and you can just keep trying and trying and trying until you stop and you really look at the situation and look behind what those complaints are. What really is the problem? And many times it is they're lonely. They don't have anyone to talk to. I say it in my class. I said, do you guys like to vent? I'm frustrated. I don't like this. We all need to have somebody to vent to. Not that we expect anybody to fix it or do something about it, but we all just need to get that off our chest. Can you do that with a staff person? Maybe, maybe not. But as a resident, you're going to do it to your family member. You're going to try to vent to somebody, another resident. But what about the person who doesn't have anybody to vent to? How does that stuff sort of accumulate and express itself? And so many times when we have someone who calls our office frequently with complaints that we just can't seem to fix, we'll often say to them, you know what, we're just going to come visit you every week. And, I'll just check in on you, see how you're doing. And oftentimes that stops the complaint because it's really the connection with someone that the person is needing. Because there isn't someone else out there just to come and visit. And so sometimes we can get wrapped up in the problem when there's not a problem. It's really that missing connection of having some connection with somebody that is so needed that when you don't have it, you find a way to get it, even if it may be viewed as a negative way. By having a complaint, they get the ombudsman to come out and address the issue. They get that attention. And so that's what we try to do is that connection is even more than any of the problems that we address.
Yeah.
All right, so going back on, Kristin, when you were talking about some of the stuff that you go over when you're doing your training, one of the things you said is you go over common problems. And again, off the record, we were speaking, and you and I could sit here for the next 5 hours and go over all the problems that we've seen. But there are some that are more prevalent in this industry. And maybe we can break it up into two, because obviously skilled nursing facility and residential care facilities, which are not healthcare providers, quote unquote, in the state of California, have different problem sets. So maybe if you could discuss the different problems in a general sense.
Sure. So we see a myriad of varying problems. Obviously, one of the most prominent in a usually skilled nursing facility is call light response time, how long it takes for an issue to be addressed. That is probably one of our bigger, more general complaints. We have a significant number of discharge and eviction complaints and issues. We will get phone calls from residents that they say, I'm being discharged and I don't have any place to go, and what am I supposed to do? They're saying I can't stay here. So that's actually one of the biggest issues, even across California, that we talk about in training is what are the top issues. One of the other next top issues is the quality of care. So anything related to it can be response time. What do they do when they come in their room? Are they taking care of all of your needs while you're in your room? If you ask for something, are they actually following through? When are they providing care that is sensitive, that is the way that it meets your needs? Are you getting the care that you should be getting? Like, are you getting 2 showers a week that you're supposed to be getting? It can be very specific to the individual care that someone is receiving. It can also be different things like, I'd like to get up and walk, and I don't have someone to get up. They won't let me get up on my own because I might fall, but then I don't have somebody that can get up who will take me walking. Or I want to walk longer than 15 minutes with RNA. So what can I do with that? How do I maintain my function? So we get a lot of different things like that. Food, things going on with the food quality, the food texture, the diet compliance, and a lot of times there's a lot of misinformation that is out there about expectations, about residents and staff communicating together and understanding where each other is coming from. And so we try to promote that communication to enhance that, because a lot of times the problems will go away when people have communicated with each other and they understand what the process is. Many residents and family members, when they have a loved one in a facility, have sort of a preconceived notion of how a facility will run. One common problem that I used to deal with years ago was that a doctor would see you every day in a skilled nursing facility, and that is not the case at all. You have to be seen within 72 hours and then once a month. So that's very different than the doctor coming to see you every day. So a lot of times what might be considered problem areas are a lack of information and a lack of communication of what is expected in this environment. So that's part of it. We also get a lot of things that are related to quality of life, such as issues of dignity and respect, of how someone is treated, how that care is provided. It can be issues of just how staff talk to them, how they're referred to. We'll often hear residents be called grandma and grandpa or honey and sweetie, and personally, I don't care to be called any of those. I don't know why any other resident would want to be called that. So different things like that. Honoring what a resident would like as their sort of daily routine, that they don't want to be woken up before 9 o'clock. So how can we make that happen? Issues with a roommate. Maybe you don't get along with your roommate. You may have a roommate who has dementia and yells, and you're alert and oriented. You maybe want to be in with a resident who you can talk to. So there's lots of different issues that we deal with. We can pretty much deal with any issue that a resident experiences at the facility, and cater any kind of resolution to specifically what will meet that resident's need. Sometimes it's not exactly what the resident is initially expecting, but it's close enough given the constraints of the environment and what we can put together that they're in agreement that that would be okay. That would be better than where they are right now. And so we deal with a lot of them, and usually we'll have multiple issues. And I think one of the biggest problems in nursing homes and facilities in general is the lack of communication. residents don't understand, and neither do family members, how these facilities work. There's no guide they're given. They're not given an orientation of like how this facility works and who you talk to and what happens. And facilities are provided information from the hospital, and they put it all in there, and they eventually will get around and assess the resident in different things. But sometimes the resident doesn't always speak up, or the right question isn't answered to get the full picture of what's going on with the resident. And so there often is that disconnect between what the resident would really like to have happen and what they expect, and what a facility's understanding of that is. And so we try to connect them and get them talking to each other in a way that effectively addresses the need of the resident. And so that they are aware, because many problems residents experience, they never say anything. But you have this issue that keeps kind of building, like they never do this, they never do this, they never do this, but they don't know that you want them to do that. So you have to let them know. And so it's that kind of a thing that we try to bridge the gap with, to help residents to advocate for themselves, because you have to speak up.
Right.
There's almost this expectation, and I felt this when I worked in facilities, that somehow because you're in a facility, the facility should automatically know what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't.
Mm-hmm.
You have to speak up. You have to say what you need, because they're not going to know.
Right. We're the legal services attorneys at Elder Law and Advocacy. We work on lots of different issues, but definitely communication is sometimes all that's needed. Like literally, we have, say, a tenant who just cannot communicate their needs to their landlord. And it just takes someone who can be calm and have just a very level-headed conversation to find a resolution. So it sounds like the Ombudsman do that a lot. I'd also like to talk about sort of the other end of the spectrum, where there are very serious things happening. For example, an SOC 341 report or other suspected elder abuse, something like that, or the types of discharges that we've heard about where someone is just left to be without anywhere to go. There's no soft landing. So can you talk a little bit about the more extreme situations?
Sure. So like with a discharge issue, our role is to ensure that all the concerns of the resident are being addressed. Facilities are required to make sure that a resident is discharging to a safe environment, and that their needs in that environment can be met. So a resident, we often deal with residents who are homeless, or you may have been at home and taking care of yourself, and something happened and it brought you into the hospital. You're in skilled nursing for rehab, but you can't rehab well enough to go home. And now what do? I may not have enough money to pay for an assisted living, and I may be able to go to an assisted living level, but they're primarily private pay and cost quite a bit of money. What am I supposed to do? And what we see now is the goal of most of the facilities is to discharge a resident when they complete their rehab services. And for some residents, it's a problem. If you don't have a place to go, where do you go? If you don't have enough money to pay for that. What if you can't actually even go to an assisted living? You need a skilled nursing level. So what we try to do, the resident has a right to stay in a facility even after, say, their rehab has stopped, their Medicare coverage is stopped, or whatever. They are then just private pay, or if they have Medi-Cal will pick up the tab. So they don't have to discharge right then. So there's time where the situation can be reviewed to see, well, what does this resident really need? What are their goals? Do they want to return home? Are they capable of returning home? Can they have services at home? Do they need to go to a different level? And so there has to be appropriate planning in place before a resident is discharged to make sure that all of those needs are being met. Are there people in place that can assist with a discharge, such as family or anyone? Does this person have nobody? So what is that actual situation? And so we have some very challenging situations that we deal with because, as many people know, we have a rather high homeless population that often wind up in the hospital and sent to skilled nursing. And they may not need to be in a skilled nursing facility, but where do you place them? And the issue really then becomes, what needs do they have that require some sort of facility? So an assisted living, are they independent? And can they be independent outside of the facility? And so that often is one of the bigger challenges, because if you're a homeless resident, you may not want to leave the facility because you have a bed and you've got your meals. And so it can create a real, it's sort of the clash between a medical issue and a social problem. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of great resources out there to deal with the social problem of homelessness.
So what happens to those? Like if you're homeless and you end up in a nursing facility and then you no longer need that level of care, what happens?
Well, that's where we come in and we're there advocating for the resident and really looking at what level of care, if any, is appropriate for this resident to have their needs met. If someone is maybe very, very independent, but they are not cognitively intact enough, say, to manage their medications, then discharging them back to homelessness would not be an issue. I mean, we have seniors that are living in their cars, that are couch surfing, that, do different things, and they're fine with going back to that situation. But when you have someone who can't meet their needs and, say, does not have anyone, you can't discharge someone who is unable to fully take care of themselves into a situation where they have no help. And so our role is, they have a right to make sure that they have appropriate discharge planning done and that it meets their needs. So our role is to advocate for them to be placed in whatever level of care they need. So if it means they need to stay in the skilled nursing facility, then we would advocate for them to stay there. If it means that they would be more appropriate in an assisted living, then we would look at trying to help them with the waiver program. We don't apply for them, but we sort of work with the facilities to say, maybe the waiver program, and they would need to stay in the facility until a bed was available on the waiver program. And there's quite a waiting list. It's not an instantaneous thing. But that's what we're really looking at, is what does the resident want and what is appropriate given the resident's level of physical need.
Okay.
Which is amazing too, because you throw in a financial aspect of it as well. These are all for-profit nursing homes. So their goal is to take the highest amount of pay, which is usually Medicare, and take all that money, and once that runs out, they're inclined to have that person be discharged. So when the ombudsman comes in and educates the resident as to what their rights are with that regard, educates the facility a lot of times with what is necessary in the discharge planning, it really solves a lot of problems that we've seen in places that don't have the same kind of coverage.
Yeah, we can stop a discharge with a phone call until, okay, this person may be totally done and everything's all in place, but for some reason they don't feel comfortable with something, then we can stop and have a meeting, make sure everything really is in place and everybody's understanding and the resident feels comfortable, and then the discharge can proceed. So, we're there to be that sort of safety net for the resident, that everything is being done as required to make sure that this is a safe discharge and an appropriate place for the resident to go.
It's so important what you're doing. How about the SOC 341? reports?
So the SOC 341s that we get, we are not, in a sense, the finder of facts of a case. So the SOC 341 goes to law enforcement. It goes to the licensing agencies for the facilities, and also to the Ombudsman. And our role in that is, so when you look at the trio of agencies that get these, law enforcement's looking at it from the perspective of whether a crime has been committed. That's their line. Licensing's looking at it from a licensing standpoint. Did the facility do what they're required to do under their license? And our role is to look at it from the perspective of the resident. So if you're a resident and maybe you were attacked by your roommate, now you're in this facility and this is your roommate. Maybe they just talked to the roommate and they did nothing else. At you as the resident, would you feel comfortable with that as a resolution to that problem? Would you feel that that addressed it well enough? And so our role is to make sure that the resident feels comfortable with whatever the current situation is. Whether they move the resident, do you feel comfortable with that? I can give you an example. I had a resident, and this was in a large assisted living, where a male resident had walked into her room and touched her on the shoulder. It scared her horribly because she was not expecting anybody walking in her room. And her response was, "I want him out of this facility." Well, obviously that's not something that is her decision to make or is something that the Ombudsman can do, because even though we have an SOC, we have two residents, we represent both residents. So we're looking out for both residents to ensure that each of their needs are being met. And so we're looking at it, okay, how would you feel in this environment? What would make you feel comfortable to now live in this environment? And so this gentleman, they were already looking at placement in the memory care unit because of different wandering. And so they placed him in the memory care unit. So I spoke to her and I said, well, he's in the memory care unit. You know, he's not able to come out unescorted. Are you okay with that? And she was kind of like, well, you know, I'd rather he not be in the building at all, but I guess that's okay. So we're trying to make sure that no matter what the issue is, that the resident feels comfortable with what is being done to address the issue, and that what they want done is as much done by what they want, or they understand the guidelines of things that can and cannot be done within that environment, such as, you know, no one can say he's going to be, in a sense, evicted out of the building. That's not appropriate. But would this be okay to you?
I see. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to cover? It's a fantastic program, and we could talk about it for hours, of course. But is there anything that you would really like to talk about?
Well, you know, I when I talk with people out in the community, I always say, if you ever go into a facility of any kind, ask who the ombudsman is, because the fact that you know about our program will get you better care right from the start. Because you're then letting them know that you know who to go talk to if there's a concern. But I know in all of my outreach efforts in trying to educate people regarding our program, I find that most people, they don't want to know anything about long-term care. You know, it isn't something any of us want to go to.
Right.
We don't want to think about it. But the real reality is you may wind up there as a short-term rehab patient. Who are you going to talk to? How are you going to know anything about that environment unless you actually listened to some information and know some resources. Doesn't mean that you're going to go there, but if you're not willing to educate yourself on what your resources are, then you wind up in a panic call of, oh my gosh, I'm now in a facility. What do I do? And I don't know who to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I highly recommend with everybody is learn the systems of things. Learn what your insurance covers. Learn, have your powers of attorney in place. Look at and think about the options that may happen so that you are at least prepared for anything that might occur. Know, well, how much does it cost to have a caregiver? Because it's easy to say, oh, I'll just get a caregiver at home. Well, how much does that cost? And most people are very surprised when they start looking at how much does a facility cost. It's very surprising. There are a lot of things that you need to look at. Many of our large facilities charge a basic room rent, but then they charge you a la carte fees on top of that. Well, can you afford the top tier rank of fees? And so how long is your money going to last?
Mm-hmm.
We deal with people who are often in assisted living facilities who run out of money. And what do you do now? And the fact remains there's not a lot out there. There's nobody that's just going to come in and suddenly pay for your room there. So people really need to think about this whole environment, not just from the perspective of one facility, but aging in general, that if you were in this arena, what does it actually mean?
Mm-hmm.
And how does it all interact? And understanding what's covered by your insurance and what is not covered by your insurance, and how those things are determined. Most people, when they come into a skilled nursing facility, if you look at Medicare, you have 100 days. But that's not always the case. So understanding just in general is important.
Mm-hmm.
And just what are your resources? Where can you go for information? HICAP, all of those resources and having that available and knowing about them and finding out about them.
Yeah. California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform also has
Excellent.
lots of amazing information on their website. It's canhr.org. They have all the
I go
resident
there all the
rights.
time.
You do?
I refer out all the time.
We all do. Fantastic organization.
I actually have Canner information on my table that I give out.
Oh, that's great. But
Excellent
that's
information.
one place where you can get the residents' rights information.
Yes, you can.
Anywhere else that people should be looking if they want to start educating themselves about these things?
Yeah, they even have, if you want to start a family council, how you would go about doing it and just plan. They have it almost all laid out for you. But they have resources for both skilled nursing facilities and assisted livings. And it's a wonderful, easy to read resource.
Okay. I love your tip about when you're admitted, just to ask who the ombudsman is. Is there anything else, anything people should be doing or saying when they are admitted?
Well, I think it's always important for them to know the names of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Like who runs dietary? If I have a dietary concern, who do I talk to? What's their system? Most of the time, you come in and nobody really talks to you for a little bit, and they're just doing things to you, and paperwork is sort of shoved at you, sign here, sign here, sign here. And, even for families, it can often be overwhelming, and they don't know who to talk to. And it's important to know who to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of the biggest things. And if you don't know who to talk to, ask someone, speak to the administrator, speak with someone in a department head fashion, because they're going to be the ones who can actually initiate some changes that if you have concerns with your loved one or, the resident themselves, they're the ones who will say, let's change this.
Mm-hmm.
But understand at least the sort of what the environment is. Do some research on it so that you're not going into it blind. And always advocate. Don't assume that people are going to just do things that you might think would be appropriate. Talk about what you need. Let them know exactly what you need. because they're not going to know. And that's the only way they're going to know, is talk to them, let them know. And I think, too, with most facilities, when family members can bring up the most important issues and not everything that could possibly go wrong, focus on what's most important and let some stuff go, because things are not going to be perfect no matter where you go.
Right.
Focus on the most important issues, because you don't want to come off as always just having a problem. You want to be working with the facility, being understanding of their limitations, because they do have limitations, but they are there to try to help you. And so be appreciative of that help that they're trying to give you, and just understand, they're not going to be able to change everything.
Right. If anyone wants to contact the Ombudsman program, either to volunteer or if they want to bring up something, how do they do that?
Well, we have an 800 number.
Mm-hmm.
It's 1-800-640-4661. We have two wonderful...
Is that for all of California, that phone number?
That is for San Diego.
San Diego, okay.
Yeah, that's specifically for San Diego. So any issue, anything related to our program goes in through that 800 number. So you can call that number. You can get to me if someone's interested in volunteering. I would love to talk to them. If they're just need information, we can't recommend a facility or say which one's good or not the best. But we can give you information on, what things would you need to consider in choosing a facility? Where might other resources be to show you those things and gather information. So there's a lot of information if you just call our number that we can give out if you've got specific questions. If you need information about, what are resident rights in a facility? We can assist with any of those things and provide you guidelines of how that would work within a facility.
Okay. Do you also have a website, or is it the phone number?
We have our website through the county, but it's sort of more of a generic, our program and website.
So that phone number, do you want to say it again?
It's 1-800-640-4661.
Okay, great. It's an amazing program. It's vital. It's, if we can get more volunteers for you, that's fantastic. And
that would be
I just
awesome.
want to express appreciation for what you personally do and what your program does for residents, because it's just so important, and otherwise it really does make a huge difference. So is there anything else you want to bring up, Andrew?
I'll second what Jaime said, for sure. No, I think we covered most of it, and I'm sure I'll have 5 more questions by the time Kristin hits the parking lot, but I know where to find her, and now I have the 800 number.
Right. And I'm sure we'll bring you back in, because you have so much to share and so many experiences
Thank
and
you.
so much insight into what's needed. So thank you very much for what you do, and we will hope to see you again.
Thank you so much for
All right, thanks,
inviting me.